Hey everybody, welcome back to another After Effects tutorial. Today we have something fairly easy, but before we get into it, I just want to remind you that your design projects are due next week. So you have 1 week from today if you're watching this on the day of. So the 27th is the final day to turn in your design projects. You will just have to email me those if you want to do that via like a Microsoft thing or Dropbox or Google Drive, whatever your preference, so long as I can access the files, that's what I need. If you wouldn't mind just zipping the files so I can download all those all at once, I know Google Drive will allow me to kind of zip things in Drive and then take all the files that way, but if I have to download them individually, that is a bit of a headache for me, so I think it already says to zip things up in the sheet for guidelines and stuff. But if you're in the graduate program, or maybe you aren't accessing that sheet constantly, please zip everything up and maybe look at the sheet again and make sure that you have everything on the list. If you're in the graduate program, maybe pop into the pitch discussion and make sure you have everything on your list, the things that were approved by me. If you didn't get anything approved by me, you have a lot of work to do, right? So make sure that your stuff is approved before you do the project. A week is probably enough time to get this stuff done if you haven't quite started yet, but you should certainly start as soon as possible if you haven't already started. Okay, let's get into After Effects. We have a pretty easy project today, and then we have a second project. So it's a 2-for-1. It's all text today. The first project I think looks great and is very, very simple. The second project could get a lot more complicated to look nice, but we're just kind of gonna tackle the basics of 3D. So it's probably not gonna look that great, and takes a little bit more time. Go figure. All right, so let's go ahead and create a new project in After Effects. If you haven't launched it already, please do. Then we are going to import some video footage, and I went ahead and downloaded some footage myself already. I went to Pixabay and I found two, one's like a drone shot and the other one's like maybe a dolly or a Steadicam in the woods. I just picked the woods. I thought that might work for this project. You can kind of watch this thing. It's a really kind of quick project to understand what we're doing, and then pick some footage based on what you think might look good. You can use your own footage. You can go to Pixabay and find some maybe 4K footage that would look nice as well. Totally up to you what content you use for this thing. I'm just going to go ahead and import that stuff that I've already downloaded. All right, and now we have our footage inside the program. I would like to create a new composition based on our footage. This time, it may actually matter what composition background color you choose. That said, we'll probably still make our composition based on our video. I'm just going to use the autumn trees for this, but again, use whatever footage you'd like. So creating a new composition here. Now, it didn't really give me the option to change the background color, but I can just by right-clicking my composition in the project window, going to composition settings, and then I have all these options. Black seems pretty good. I can change the color to whatever I want here, though, especially if I'm not going to use two videos in my my text tutorial. If I just use one, which is totally acceptable if you'd like to do it that way, then I want to make sure that my background is the color I want. From here, we will create some new text. We'll just use the type tool up here and draw out a big text box. And what we want is something nice and thick and bold, right? The whole idea here is that we're going to create some cutout text. So we can do this in Photoshop. It's not quite as easy in Photoshop, honestly, and you can't do it with video easily in Photoshop. So we're doing it with video in After Effects instead. So I'm just going to write the woods, and it is super duper small, and I may have made a typo there. We'll find out. I'm just going to select all and scale that up pretty good. Too many O's. All right, we'll just get rid of one of those O's. The woods. Now it's spelled properly. And Arial's okay, but I'm just going to maybe find something that is a little bit thicker. We'll just go with Arial Bold. Nice and easy for us. A little bit thicker though still. And we're going to upscale that even bigger. We want it nice and big, taking up most of our composition. Maybe a little bit bigger still. And that's about all right. From here, I would like to keep my stuff all centered. Again, this is maybe a personal preference thing, so you can decide if you want to do things centered in the text box and centered in your composition. If you eyeball it and just like hope for center, that looks pretty bad, honestly. Like it might look okay on your phone or a small screen, but once you blow it up big, you can really tell that it's off and you intended to make it centered. So if you want it off center, make sure that you go off center, right? So if you do a left align, that's totally fine. But I like center and center. It feels good. So I'll go to paragraph and center my text within my text box. And then I'll go to align. I don't see that on my right side. So I'll just go to window and align. And I will align center and center. Maybe the space between the and woods is a little bit different than what I want. So I can maybe select all that and adjust that as well. So there's some leading and kerning and all of those things associated with text inside After Effects under the character tab. So we'll get the and woods kind of close together, and maybe I could scale it up just a little bit more still. All right, that's looking much better to me. Once again, I'm going to center and center on the align tab. Since I messed with some things, it might move it. All right, looks good there. Now what I want to do is I want to be able to see the woods in the text that says the woods. So it's really, really simple for us to do. It's a blending mode on After Effects. So it's not a blending mode in Photoshop. If we click on the drop downs for blending modes, we're going to see a whole bunch of stuff that we're familiar with, and then a couple of things that are new. And one of those new things is stencil alpha. So if your text is white and you have a background behind it, and we click stencil alpha, it's going to do exactly what we want it to do. That said, if you don't have blending modes available to you, in the very bottom left corner of the program, you'll see options for transfer controls and layer switches. And if we click on the transfer controls, if it's selected blue, that will give you the option to use a blending mode. If it is unselected, you won't see it on your layers panel. So we're essentially done with this project. There is some stuff that we can do to make this look a little bit nicer though. If I play this back, I can see that my woods move underneath my text. That's exactly what we're going for here. So some nice subtle movement there. If you have something that's a little bit faster moving, that's totally fine as well. It's really up to your personal preferences with this stuff. Okay, so we have a black background, but a lot of the text is kind of dark and pretty colorful, so it's not super easy to read. So what we like with our text is a lot of contrast. If you have a white background or a very light background and white text, it's kind of hard to read, right? So we are going to take the same kind of process that we would do with graphic design with our video here. So what I want to do is just add an effect to my video file. So not my text, but the video file itself. If I go to effects and presets on the right side of the screen, my computer is not happy with me right now. Let's see if it bounces back. There it goes. Okay. So I'm just going to search for, if you search for hue and saturation or brightness and contrast, any of the adjustment layer items that we have in Photoshop, they should appear, almost all of them, as effects in After Effects. So if I just search for a brightness and contrast, we know exactly how that works, and we can click, drag, and drop that onto our video layer. And now we can adjust the brightness, and we can adjust the contrast if we want to adjust the contrast. Maybe I'll leave that alone. And then it is a little bit yellow, and maybe I want to keep that yellow, but if I don't, I can always search for hue and saturation. Drag and drop that onto either my video or my effect controls area up here. Effect controls allow you to control the effects that you've added to your video. So that's where we adjusted our brightness and contrast. Now here, if I wanted to shift the hue, I certainly could, but then maybe I can't tell that it's woods anymore. But I can also make it a little less saturated. So now it looks not quite black and white, but it's much lighter, much easier to read, the woods, and almost black and white in there too. All right. So we could call it a day at this point, but if we wanted one video on top of another video here, we might run into an issue. So if I was like, oh, okay, here's my video, my text, and then I want to add these snowy trees underneath it, the natural inclination that you should have is like, I'm just going to drag and drop it underneath. But that stencil alpha cuts through everything underneath it. So we can't see those snowy trees. Instead, we have to kind of work around how After Effects wants to do these blending modes. So to fix that up, it's pretty easy. All we have to do is select our video and our text, right click, go to pre-compose, just like we did with our ball animation. And then we can just call this text. So it's going to be the text with the cutout. And what we want to make sure we do is move all attributes to the new composition. If we don't do that, it's going to keep our stencil alpha outside of our pre-composition, which would give us the same issue we had just a second ago. So if we move all attributes, now you'll see text is just its own layer. It's its own composition in there. And the blending mode is normal, even though we have that text cut out. Now, if we click and drag our snowy trees, having an issue there, there we go. Snowy trees underneath it. Now we can see we have both videos at the same time. So it's doing exactly what we want it to do. So that's a nice, easy tutorial for you, and looks kind of nice. So if you're looking to maybe do something for a video intro and you're like, I don't have that much time, but I do have some videos and stuff, this is a good like opening title potentially. I've seen it in a lot of big budget movies. So very simple way to get an interesting looking text project, right? Okay, so that's one down. We can save this thing. If you'd like, you can go ahead and save this, export this, and you can show it to us. We are not requiring you to export and show us this one, though. That's just for the following one. So if we want to save it, call it text cutout. It always helps to save these After Effects projects. So it would be really easy for you to go, oh, what was that blending mode I can get in here? Oh, it's called Stencil Alpha. And how do I make it so that I can do a video underneath it? Oh, it's a pre-comp like this. You can even open these things up and just change out the videos and change out the text, and then you really don't have to do much work at all. Okay, let's do the next project though. File, new project. Okay, this one we are going to create from scratch, and we're doing some 3D stuff, which is really interesting and fun. So let's go ahead and click new composition from here. We can call it 3D text. Okay, and depending on who you are, if you're an animation major, maybe 29.97 frames per second. If you're a film person like me, 23.976 makes some sense. Now, if I select a preset, I could do that. Instead, let's just type it in. It's easier for me. 1920 by 1080 Very common resolution. Now, duration is set for 12 seconds. That's definitely going to be longer than I need, but remember, longer is easier for us, so we'll just leave it like that. And then our black background color, that's all we need. But there is a little tab up here that could come in handy where 3D renderer, if we click on that, we'll see what renderer the program is using. So Classic 3D should be the preset for you if you've never worked in 3D before. But that said, Classic 3D has some severe limitations. If we click Cinema 4D, I think it says the differences here, like what options you actually have. So you gain these things, but you lose these things. Now, if you happen to click, oh, I started my composition and I want to change my 3D renderer, it's totally that's a possibility after the fact. You can always change it, just like you can change most of your composition settings after the fact as well. So we get extruded levels, right? We can add extrusion depth, and that's something that we really want with this project. If you don't know what that means yet, no problem. We want bevels as well. We're not going to mess with reflections, and then we're not really messing with any of this stuff beyond extrusion depth and beveling. Here's what you lose though. You lose blending mode. So if you wanted to do something that used that stencil alpha, but you wanted to work within 3 dimensions, you're going to have some trouble if you have Cinema 4D selected. So maybe look at these things. If you find that some certain things that you want to do are not enabled or don't work for you once you make your stuff 3-dimensional, it might be because of the 3D renderer that you've chosen. Now, Cinema 4D is a little bit more processor intensive, so it can really slow down your computer, especially if you don't have a decent computer. So we're going to put your computers to the test today. It'll probably slow down my laptop a little bit, but I know that we can at least get through it on my laptop. Now, if you find that you're totally unable to do this, this is probably like one of 2 projects that will be the most processor intensive in the class. But it can get much more complex than what we're doing today. So do keep that in mind if you do have an interest in like working in 3 dimensions in After Effects. All right, enough about that. Let's get started. So we're just going to take the type tool again. We are going to make ourselves some text. I'm just going to write 3D text, and that is too large. So I'm going to Command A or Control A and turn it down a little bit. 3D text looks great. You can type whatever you'd like here. In fact, what I would prefer is that you just type your name. That way I know that you did this and you didn't use anybody else's project or anything like that. If you write something that's personalized that I know would be you, that's just fine though. Okay, so our 3D text is here, but it isn't 3D yet. It's really easy for us to make it 3D though. So if I want to make it 3D, all I have to do is click this little button. It's right by the motion blur button. So it looks like a cube, right? So if I click that, toggle that on for our layer, our 3D text layer, it is now 3D. It doesn't look any different because we haven't changed anything about it, but it does work within 3D space. So if I click P on my keyboard for position, you'll notice that I now have 3 options to change that property. So you have an X position, a Y position, and a Z position, all enabled. So if I want to move through Z space, it looks like our text gets smaller, but really it's just getting further away from the camera. Speaking of cameras, you'll notice in the bottom of the composition window, we see active camera. And we can change from active camera to a front view, a left view, a top view, all of that stuff. Active camera is what actually gets exported though. So active camera is something that you probably want to be on at all times, but if you'd like to see more than just the active camera view, you can click on the one view right to the right of it. and maybe change it to 2 views or 3 views or 4 views. I guess 3 views isn't an option, but 4 is. So you can stack these things horizontally. Then you can see an active camera and a top view. So this top view shows our text, but our text is so thin, it's just like a razor in our window there. Now, if we added extrusion depth, all of a sudden we'd be able to see that stuff. All right, let's just switch back to one view temporarily. I'm also going to turn off 3D layers. By the way, if you don't have 3D layers, it's the same thing as the transfer controls. In the bottom left, there is a layer switches. You need to make sure that that's enabled to turn on both motion blur or the 3D option for your layers. Okay, so before we add some extrusion depth and all that fun stuff, align does not work with 3D layers. So if I have this 3D layer selected on, I went to align and I said, hey, align the center, it's going to give me this error. And the reason for that is align only works in two positions, X and Y. It's unable to figure out what the center of a Z, the Z position would be, right? So Z extends infinitely, and how can it find the middle point of infinity? You just can't do that. You can't divide infinity in half. So align will not work. So what I get into the habit of doing is before I jump into 3D, I just align center and align center. That way everything's kind of centered in front of my active camera, at least, before I toggle on my 3D. All right, so that's pretty good there. 3D is now toggled on. I could toggle on motion blur, but maybe I'll save that for the end. That way it doesn't slow down my computer too much. Now, I'm just going to rotate a little bit. So we have X rotation, Y rotation. If I just press R there, I also see Z rotation. And what I want is just some X rotation, or Y rotation, sorry, Y rotation. Just to kind of turn that text toward me a little bit. And now we can sort of get the idea of 3 dimensions. It's just so razor thin that we can't really tell still. So a little bit of rotation there, I can understand that there's some 3D going on here. And then if I twirl down on my 3D text entirely, we have all those transform controls, and we have a few new ones because of the 3D. But underneath that, we see geometry options and we see material options. Now, material options has a bunch of stuff that I highly recommend that you experiment with, but because we're an introductory class, we're really just going to mess with the geometry options right now. So geometry options give you extrusion depth, and we can just click and turn that up. And what's going to end up happening is you're going to see your text turn kind of bold looking, and you might not be able to see the hole in the D anymore, or depending on what your text looks like, it may look a little bit funky, and maybe that's too much extrusion depth, but I'm feeling like that's going to be just fine. Now, if I jumped into my top view, all of a sudden I don't see that razor thin area. Instead, I see something much thicker, right? So all we've done is add thickness to our text. But because it's a pure white and a pure white everywhere, it doesn't really look great yet. So what we're going to do to fix that stuff up is add some lights. Now, if we just right click in our layer panel, go to new and then light, we have some options for different lights, parallel lights, spotlights, point lights, and ambient lights. You can experiment with all of these things, but really all we're going to work with is spotlights today. An ambient light kind of lights everything sort of indiscriminately, I guess. So it's going to light not in a direction, right? It's just going to light everything very flat. Now, a spotlight, you actually direct at the text and you put where the light actually is. And I think that that's a lot more illustrative of what lights can actually do. So if we are talking about film and filmmaking, we'll kind of do like this 3-point lighting scenario. So our biggest light, or our most important light, maybe, for a 3-point lighting scheme is our key light. So let's just write key light. And we can color this light whatever we'd like. I'm just gonna pick something that's sort of like tungsten-y, this orangey color, and turn up our intensity a little bit there. We had mine turned way down from a prior project, so I'm gonna put mine close to 100. Cone angle 25. Let's just see what that does real quick. Cone feather, we'll leave it at 100 just to see what it does, and then we can always come back and alter these things. I'm just going to go ahead and press OK, and then here's what our light's doing. It's very close to our text, and maybe too narrow of a angle. So what's going on here is, here's our light. Here is where our light is pointed, and the intensity or the angle or the position is really not doing well for our text right now. And I would guess that it's both the angle and the position of our key light. So let's go ahead and turn up the intensity real quick and see what that does. If I just double click my my light that I've created, I can turn up the intensity. That's doing nothing at all. I can turn up the cone angle, so that's the spread. You can actually see how my my end position is spread out from my light. And what's happening when I turn up my cone angle is I'm seeing everything kind of backlit, right? So the real issue is that my lights are behind my text. So even though my light is pointed at my text, it exists behind it. And that's why it's not lighting up the front of the text. And I can't really see that from my active camera view, so I really need that top view or side view. It's whichever view works best for you, but I'm just going to turn on 2 views so I can see both at the same time. And if I just click on that area of my composition window, I can zoom out a little bit and we can see what's happening. So this light is really close to just like a side light, but it's not in front of my text. So this is the top view. Here's my light. I can just move it in front of my text. And now it's doing basically what I want it to do. It's not quite getting that T, so I'll back it up a little bit maybe. There we go. All right, so nice and simple stuff there, right? Here's my light pointed at the front of my text, and that's going to be my key light, our brightest light. And if I double click that, I see that my intensity is up to 193. So in a 3-point lighting scheme, we have a key light, then we have a fill light, and the fill light is intended to fill in any of the shadows that the key light kind of misses. So we'll put that on the other side of our 3D text, and just to make sure that we can see what the fill light is actually doing, we'll make it a different color. So once again, we're going to right click on our layers panel, go to new and then light, and then we'll just change this to be, I don't know, something, we'll just do a pure white as though it's daylight and our camera is balanced to daylight. So we'll press OK, and once again we see that our light is kind of placed in the wrong place and is too bright this time, and the cone angle is a little bit off. So we're just going to move this stuff where it should be and point it where it should go. So that's our point of interest there, and we'll point it at our text. And now it's doing what it should be doing, but it's way too powerful. Our key light is supposed to be the strongest light, so we'll turn that way down. And maybe it needs to be just a little bit backed off. There we go. All right, and if we want to see what these things are doing independently, I can just shy them out. Okay, so that's doing exactly what I need. Now the third light, and there's probably 4 lights in a 3-point lighting scenario, but we don't have an actual background. So we'll just do the 3 lights that are on your subject. So you have a key light, you have a fill light. Let's just rename that one, by the way, while we're at it. Okay, and then we have a backlight or a rim light, depending on what you want to call it. So we'll just right click again, make another light, new light, and we'll just call this rim light. All right, and we'll change the color again. This time, pick something that would be like a nice gel. So I'm just going to go with like a blue light. And I'll turn the intensity up. And I can always adjust the cone angle if I need it, but so far 83 degrees is working pretty well for me. We'll see if we need that later. And this time, once again, it's just kind of placed my light in a place where I don't want it. So I'm just going to flip that around. We're going to put it on the other side of our text, kind of like what we had with our first light. So it just needs to be on the other side of our text and kind of sidey. So like way on the side of it. And it looks like ours is kind of down low. So I can't see it in the top view, right? Because that's just from the top, but I can see it here. And we don't see much of what's happening because the text is kind of turned towards the light itself. So I can correct that in a couple of ways. I could maybe move my light to the other side here. I can make it really sidey, and then I should get a little bit of something. Not really seeing it. But as soon as we do the next thing, we will. I'm just going to flip it around so you can actually see it, though. There, we see it. Okay, so that's filling in all of this stuff in the D and on the inside of the E there. And it's getting kind of white-ish, so maybe we'll turn down the intensity just to give it a little bit of something, but not too much. All right, maybe up a little bit. All right, so now it's filling things in on the sides just a little there, but not so much that it really starts to blow out things that we don't want blown out. And maybe I'd want it a little bit on our X and our T there, so maybe I can just back it off. There we go. Now it's kind of falling on everything. So there are our 3 lights for a three-point lighting scheme with some 3D text. But it's not really doing anything. It just kind of looks like something that we could generate in Photoshop or generate in a lot of programs. In After Effects, we can actually move within 3D space. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do something super simple for me, and then you are going to get creative with this stuff. So I'm just going to reset my rotation here. So my rotation right now is at 29 degrees on Y rotation. I'm just going to set that to 0 so it's facing at me, straight at me. Then I'm going to create a new camera. So same way we did our lights, right click, new, then camera. And we'll just leave all of this kind of alone. We'll change the focal length here to 50 millimeters, and we'll go ahead and leave it as camera number 1. All of this stuff you can certainly get into as you get more advanced, but we're just going to keep it kind of simple today. We'll just leave that with the focal length of 50 millimeters, and everything else we'll just kind of leave alone. So once we create that, it's not going to change anything, right? We, in our active camera view, we still see the same image, and that should be the same regardless of lens choice that you use. But lens choice does matter when you say like make a camera movement or something like that. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to animate the camera movement and our 3D text as well at the same time. So let's toggle on keyframes for rotation in the Y dimension. So keyframes are toggled on. Our playhead is at 0 frames, and we're going to move forward to about 5 seconds. Okay, and then we are going to do one full rotation. All right. Now we are going to go to our camera position. So click on the camera layer, press P on our keyboard, toggle on keyframes for camera or for position on camera, and then move our playhead to that 5 second mark, and we will move in the Z space position until we get past our text. We're just going to run straight through our text. And it looks like we may end up traveling through the T, but that's fine. All right, so we push past through the T in that 5 second span. Now, if you want things to look nice, you can add eases. I wouldn't do it with the text because it's not really going to matter that well. Maybe, yeah. Since we're moving past it, let's go ahead and just add eases. Just get used to adding eases all the time. So from a stop, ease out to a stop, ease in, and ease out with the camera. And maybe ease in with the camera too. Let's see what that does. And we'll have a quick look at how our text works. As it rotates, you should see those lights kind of react differently as the text actually rotates. So like the backlight will fill in, or the rim light will fill in different areas as we move. Let's go ahead and turn off the two views so things move a little bit faster. And yes, it is moving kind of slowly, even for me. It's just my laptop. Working with the laptop. After Effects does not like laptops. There we see some of that blue from the backlight as it turns. All right, so playing this back, it looks a little sketchy when we get in tight and like the text hits the camera a few times, but we could do something much more subtle in terms of our rotation throughout. That way it wouldn't kind of swing into our camera. So if we just did a very short rotation with the big camera move, or a short camera move with the big rotation, this would look a lot nicer. But I think that you get the idea of what's going on here. And now we could just toggle on our motion blur for our text layer, because that's the only thing actually moving. And it would look nice. We could export this thing and call it a day. But I want to see what you guys can do. So if you look at your light, any like position or even like intensity, cone angle, all that stuff is all keyframeable. All right. So you can do some kind of crazy strobe lighting effects. You can do if you were really interested in moving lights around as though it's like a car passing by or something, you could certainly do something like that. You can do anything with your 3D text as well, moving in 3 dimensions positionally or through rotation, or even scale. You can just mess with scale as well. But the idea for our project this week, what we're going to export and show on discussions, is 3D text with at least 6 keyframed properties. So it's your choice which properties you'd like to keyframe and animate. But, if you do something with the lights, just kind of, get outside of just the lights. There's a lot of, you can keyframe color for the lights and stuff as well, so they can change color over time. So don't just do the lights and leave the text alone. You have a camera that you can animate. You have the text itself that you can animate, and then you have all the lights that you can animate. So do at least a couple of those layers and not just the lights. People tend to just do something with the lights and then call it a day. So animate those things. You have 6 properties that you need to animate. And then export this thing. Make sure that you have motion blur turned on for the text layer especially if you animate the text layer, and then publish it on discussion. So it should be a nice and easy project for you this week, especially if you can pick up the whole idea of like 3D space and stuff. But remember, you have the design project due next week. So nice, easy project this week so that you can work on your design projects um, with enough time to actually get those things turned in. I will accept them at any point after what for me is tomorrow. That would be the 20th. So anytime after the 20th, if you're ready to submit that stuff, feel free to email me. I'll send you an email that says, hey, I got it. Just a quick email confirmation and stuff. And then you should be good to go. I'll get you a grade at some point for it, right? Okay, so I will talk to you all next week. Good luck with this project. Good luck with your design projects. And we will have another After Effects tutorial for you in 1 week's time.